Welcome to the next Opus walkthrough. In this video, we're going to be covering the various controls and features contained within the Opus Engine, which has been built from the ground up with the end user in mind. Let's start by taking a look at the Browse page, which centers around finding and loading instruments. The libraries and database modes offer different ways to search for and find instruments. The Libraries mode allows you to search for instruments according to the libraries they belong to. Just select the library you want to use, navigate the subfolders, and the instruments will appear in the far right column. You can find information about the selected library and instrument in the description box. The Database mode allows you to narrow down a selection of instruments by selecting from a variety of attributes across a range of categories. Instruments that match the selected criteria will appear in the results list. The search bar allows you to find instruments based on keywords. Just enter keywords into the search bar field, hit return, and the results will appear in the results list. Instruments that are currently displayed in the results list are accompanied by an icon based on the current status of an instrument. A star icon indicates an instrument is ready to be loaded. You can also save the instrument as a favorite by clicking the icon. If the icon that appears next to an instrument is a cloud icon, it means the instrument can be downloaded instantly. We'll show you how this works a bit later on in the video. A question mark icon means the drive location where the instrument was previously stored has been changed. Plug in the drive where the instrument directory is located, or find the new location. When selected, these filter controls will only show instruments that you favorited, instruments that are currently installed, or instruments that you own, even if they aren't currently installed. Before you start loading instruments, we recommend setting up your preferred MIDI channel assignment mode, found in the Settings menu under Preferences and MIDI. Here you can select Auto Increment or Omni mode. Selecting Auto Increment will load each instrument to the subsequent MIDI channel. This is ideal if you want to use Opus as a multi-timbral instance where multiple instruments are loaded into a single instance of Opus but are individually controlled by their respective tracks in your digital audio workstation. Here's an audio example of a multi-output, commonly referred to as a multi-timbral, instance of Opus in action. On the other hand, selecting Omni will load each instrument to receive MIDI on all channels. This mode is ideal if you want to load a single instrument per instance of Opus, or if you want to stack multiple instruments in the same instance, as this will cause all instruments within the Opus instance to respond together, like in this example. Also, before you begin, you should be aware of two features that might help you find the sound you want. The sound previews provide a short audio example when selecting an instrument in the results list without having to load it. You can turn these on or off, as well as modify the volume. You can also enable the Quick Load feature, which allows you to pull up instruments almost instantly by loading an instrument in a purged state. We'll cover how the purge function works in detail a bit later on in the video. Instruments can be loaded in a number of different ways. Double-clicking on an instrument either adds it to an empty instance of Opus, or replaces the instrument that's both currently loaded and active. You can also drag and drop, or use the top toolbar buttons to add an instrument, replace an instrument, or replace all currently loaded instruments. Additionally, holding down the Shift key and clicking on the first and last instruments in a sequence will select all instruments in between, or you can hold the Command key to select multiple instruments that aren't listed sequentially. You can then drag and drop them into the instrument rack to load them. Finally, holding the Option key and double-clicking on an instrument will add it to the instrument rack without replacing any. For more on all the ways in which you can load instruments, refer to the Opus user manual. As hinted at earlier, Opus now features individual instrument downloads, meaning you no longer have to wait hours for an entire library to download and install if you just want to use a single instrument from the library. The settings for this function can be found in the Settings menu under Preferences and Locations. Here, you'll have the options to select your preferred sample content location, the server region closest to your geographic location, and whether or not you want Opus to automatically download instruments. Let's download the Staduk from Silk. The download progress will appear in the upper right-hand corner of the Opus user interface. The instrument is now ready to be played. The Play page contains 4 selectable windows, which includes the Player window, the MIDI Tools window, the Automation window, and the Articulations window, each of which will be covered in detail later in the next few sections. The Palette menu allows you to switch between the various windows in the Play page. It also contains the Instrument Selector menu, which allows you to switch between all loaded instruments by clicking in the drop-down menu. The Purge control function allows you to unload an instrument from your RAM by selecting the red button, or reload it by selecting the green button. And the Snapshot Ellipsis menu allows you to make your own changes to an instrument using the controls in the Player window, and then save them for recall later. The Player window contains the user interface for the instrument currently selected in the Instrument Selector menu. Please note that some controls, like the Consordino button in Hollywood Strings, are unique to a given EastWest library, while others, like the envelope controls, are common to all EastWest libraries. For more on instrument-specific controls, you can refer to the individual instrument user manuals. The keyboard that appears at the bottom of the Opus user interface shows the range of an instrument as white keys, keys outside the range of the instrument as grayed out, key switch triggers as blue keys, and the currently active key switch as a yellow key. This window features a selection of MIDI tools that offer everything from simple note transposition to more complex humanization of MIDI timing and events. To add a MIDI tool, simply click on the ellipsis menu in the Palette menu and select Add MIDI Tool. Let's take a look at the arpeggiator first. This tool will turn chords into sequences of notes synced to a tempo. You can select the duration of notes in an arpeggio, the groove, and the direction of the arpeggio as well. The gate determines the value of each note, with a setting of 0 resulting in no sound, and a setting of 1 resulting in the full note being played. The re-trigger switch will cause the remaining notes of the chord to be re-triggered when one of the notes is released. Here's an example. Chord Scales use a single note, which serves as the root of the chord, to trigger chords based on the mode, root, and chord selections. In this example, we're using the Mixolydian mode with a root of G on a 7th chord. Chorder just uses a single note, which serves as the root of the chord, to trigger chords based on the preset selected in the chord menu. In this example, we've selected the 1, 3, 4, 6 sus chord. Glide creates a continuous glide in pitch between overlapping notes. You can specify the amount of time in which the glide occurs in milliseconds based on absolute values, meaning the glide duration will be the same regardless of the interval between the notes, or based on an octave. Let's see how it sounds on this instrument from the Ghostwriter library. Humanizer randomizes various sound parameters, like note on, note off, delays, or velocity. This can be particularly useful in ostinato passages to make them feel more natural. In this before example, the ostinato line feels kind of robotic. Now, with the Humanizer applied. The Midi Compressor compresses the range of MIDI values for either note velocity or MIDI CC. Velocities or MIDI CC values above the threshold you set will be reduced according to the ratio you determine. The makeup control will increase or decrease velocity or CC values overall, or you can use auto makeup to do this automatically. Notice how in this before example, the velocities are highly inconsistent. Now with the compressor applied. Midi Echo creates a delay with actual MIDI data, with the ability to change velocity, tuning, panning, and other parameters over the course of that delay line. Here it is in action, adding some interesting color to this ostinato line. The Pocket Recorder allows you to record, store, and play back MIDI files. Just enable the record mode, play what you want to record, and click the record button again to stop recording. You can then save the recording by clicking on the desk icon and choosing a name. You can then recall it using this drop-down menu. Restrict to Scale can be a useful creative tool as it only plays notes based on the selected scale, root note, and mode selection. Notes that aren't in the selected scale can be ignored completely or remapped to the next higher or lower notes according to either a set rule or smart algorithm. In this example, our root note is F, the scale is Dorian, and the notes outside the scale will default to the next higher note in the designated scale. And finally, the Transpose tool transposes the incoming MIDI note by plus or minus 48 semitones. Here's a bassoon solo from Hollywood Orchestra. Now transposed up by 2 semitones. The automation window contains a powerful set of tools that allow you to see and customize parameter automation, macro construction, and MIDI controller mapping. The automation parameter column automatically populates with the most commonly used automation parameters. These are all controlled within your DAW the same way you might automate track volume, so we won't be able to demo them here since different DAWs do this in different ways. If you don't see a parameter that you want to automate, go to the player window and right-click on a knob, slider, or button and select Add Automation. This option only appears if a parameter can be automated. You can then rename it however you want to. The macro parameter column allows you to create and control macros, which can be particularly useful for controlling complementary CC parameters together, like expression and vibrato. In this example, we've only recorded expression data, which is controlled by CC11. Since the vibrato level is static, this passage is lacking some emotion, so let's combine both expression and vibrato into one control. In order to set this up, click on the ellipsis menu and select Add Macro. Then, click on the macro. Let's rename it to Expression and Vibrato. Then, enter the CC value that you want the macro assigned to. In our case, we're going to use one of the keyboard sliders that controls CC73 within our DAW. Next, select Add Target from the ellipsis menu and simply drag and drop your desired CC parameters from the right column onto the target. In this particular patch, the modulation wheel controls vibrato and expression controls the dynamics of the instrument. You can modify the response curves by clicking on the yellow area here, but in our case, we just want a standard linear response curve. We've duplicated the MIDI from the previous passage and converted CC11 to CC73. Which our new macro is assigned to. Now watch as both CC1, vibrato, and CC11, expression, respond to the new macro. The MIDI controller mapping column allows you to see or remap existing MIDI continuous controller, CC, assignments to new ones. It automatically populates with MIDI CCs that are available for the selected instrument. All three functions in the automation window allow you to save presets if you want to load them across other instances of Opus quickly. The Perform page centers around controlling how individual instruments behave together. Use the window selectors in the secondary palette menu to switch the Perform page between the zones and all instances windows, which will both be covered in detail in the next few sections. The Perform page is also home to an additional window with unique performance controls for some EastWest libraries, like the Hollywood Orchestrator and Word Builder from many of the EastWest vocal libraries. Let's check out the Zone window first, which is designed to maximize your ability to customize articulation sets and instrument stacks within a single instance of Opus, and the possibilities are virtually endless. The best way to explain this window will be to build an articulation set from the ground up and continue adding features. So let's begin. We'll start with these marcato and spiccato violins patches. The first thing we'll want to do is use the group feature to group them together. The importance of grouping instruments is that it restricts the number of active instruments in each group to exactly one. You're basically telling Opus that you only want one instrument out of that group to be active at a time. You'll see why this is significant in a moment. Next, we're going to select Key Switch in the Trigger Options menu, which will assign our two articulations to a key switch note outside the range of the instrument. Let's set the marcato violins to C0 and the spiccato violins to C#0. Now let's check out this short example that key switches between the articulations. Cool, but now let's add some flutes to double the violins. So we'll start by loading these marcato and staccatissimo flute articulations from Hollywood Orchestra, grouping them together, selecting the key switch trigger option, and setting the key switches. For convenience, we've already created and named the rest of the groups we'll be using in this example. Because the marcato violins and the marcato flutes are on the same key switch but in different groups, they will play together. And the same goes for the staccatissimo flutes and the spiccato violins. Let's see how this sounds. Now let's mix it up a bit more by adding a velocity-triggered Glockenspiel. We're going to go back to the Browse page, load a Glockenspiel, assign it to its own group, and use the Trigger Options menu to specify velocity. And let's enter a range of 60 to 127. This way, the Glock will only be triggered on higher velocity notes in the passage. We also want the Glock to add more sparkle to the selection. So let's use the Octave menu to tune the Glock up exactly one octave from the played note. Sounds good, but let's make one more change. We can also restrict the range of the violins so that they don't play lower or higher than the flutes. So let's use the key range function to restrict the range of notes that the violin can play from C3 to A5. This feature is useful in cases where you might want the entire instrument group to play together at all times. Alternatively, you can use CC values to switch between articulations. We've built this simple articulation set the same way we built the previous one, but instead of selecting the key switch option in the Trigger Options menu, we selected Controller. We then assigned it to CC73, which is controlled by one of the sliders on our MIDI keyboard, and specified that, at CC values from 0 to 64, the staccatissimo articulation is active. At CC values from 64 to 127, the marcato articulation is active. Notice how when the slider is moved, the light indicating which articulation is active is switching between the two instruments. Here's a short example. In addition to the trigger options already demonstrated so far, you can also choose to trigger different instruments using a key switch range, as well as program changes, which are going to be specific to your digital audio workstation. Now, it should be pointed out that some of what we just did can be accomplished in the standard key switch patches found in most EastWest libraries, but the Zones window allows for much more customization and flexibility. The All Instances window affords you a global view of all instruments loaded across all instances of Opus in your digital audio workstation. From here, you can use the Purge function to unload or reload any instrument from RAM. One of the more unique bleeding-edge features of Opus is that when you do purge an instrument but still need it for playback, it will only load as many sample files as are necessary to play a given line. Notice that with this entire violin legato patch loaded, it's taking up 1.8 gigs of RAM. Let's purge it again and watch as Opus loads the necessary samples into RAM in real time as we play through this passage. Now the patch is only using a few megabytes of RAM. This feature can be endlessly useful in large sessions loaded on computers with limited hardware, like laptops and older machines. In the All Instances window, you can also change the articulation for any loaded key switch patches and find other controls such as the voice limit per instrument, octave controls, and key ranges. Don't be intimidated by the mix page. If you're familiar with your digital audio workstation, you'll be familiar with most of the functions found here, although there may be a few minor workflow differences. The mix page is divided into 3 areas: the mixer palette menu, which includes a few different controls that we'll explain later, the effects rack area, where you'll be able to see and control effects, sends, and inserts, and the mixer area that contains the mixer channels in the lower half of the page. Let's explore this page via demonstration, starting with instrument routing. To begin with, there are 2 different views you can choose, depending on what works best for you. The console view, which gives you an expanded view of all the instruments and channels, and a tabs view, which only displays the channels in the instrument you select. Let's stick with the console view for this demonstration. To fully appreciate the power of the routing features in Opus, you'll need to load it as a multi-timbral instance in your digital audio workstation. To do this, be sure to load the multi-output version of the Opus player in your DAW. Next, we need to create the auxiliary tracks that Opus will use to route the various channels through. This process is different depending on which DAW you're working in, but in Logic, all you need to do to set up these tracks is to go to your mix window, click on the plus sign, right-click on the auxiliary track you just created, and select Create Track to see it in your tracks window. Once you've done this, you can route various instruments, instrument groups, individual instrument mics, and effects sends in Opus to these channels in your digital audio workstation, giving you maximum control over how your audio is routed, processed, and exported in your DAW. If you don't see multiple audio outputs available, they can be set by navigating to Preferences, Audio Engine, and Output Configuration. We've already set up the desired routing for the staccato patch in the simple key switch we made in the Perform page, so let's set up identical routing in the legato patch. Our goal is to have the room and surround mics on one track, each individual instrument's close mic on its own track, and the reverb send on its own track. So, for the room and surround mic sub-channels, let's assign these to Opus 1 and Opus 2. We'll assign Opus 3 and 4 for the trumpets, Opus 5 and 6 for the trombones, Opus 7 and 8 for the saxes, and Opus 9 and 10 for the reverb. Note that these all correspond to the auxiliary tracks in our DAW. Now, let's listen to all the instrument mics as well as the reverb together. Now, let's solo just the trumpet mics. In this example, we're achieving this by soloing the track in our DAW. Even the reverb can be soloed. In addition to specifying routing options, the console includes the master channel, which sums all of the subchannels into a single channel, and the subchannels, which consist of various mics and FX sends. The master channel has volume, panning, solo, and mute controls, as well as buttons that allow you to show or hide the mic subchannels or effects subchannels. The subchannels have most of these same controls, but also include a button that allow you to load or unload mic positions from your RAM. In the Opus Engine, effects inserts and effects sends work in much the same way as they work in most digital audio workstations. To add an insert, which will only affect the given channel or subchannel, just click the slot with the plus sign and select from any of the effects in the effects submenu. Let's add an EQ to the trumpet close mic to tame some of the frequencies around 2300 Hz. The EQ will then appear in the effects rack when you have the trumpet subchannel selected. You can quickly copy and paste the same effect onto any other subchannels by dragging and dropping the effect onto the desired channel, which in this case will be the trumpet mic in the staccato patch since we want them to have a consistent sound. To add an effects channel, click on the ellipsis menu in the palette toolbar and select Add FX Channel. This will create an effects channel in the mixer. Let's add a delay to our new effects channel. We can route it however we want to, but let's just include it in the same MIDI channel as the reverb. Now, let's send some of the signal from the saxophone to it, which can be done in a similar way as adding an insert. Just click on the FX Send area to specify how much of the signal you want to send to the effects channel. Alternatively, you can use the Effect Send control in the effects rack area to do this. We'll need to duplicate this send effect in the staccato instrument for a consistent sound. We've already set this up for convenience, and all we need to do is click on the small green rectangle next to the insert to enable it. Now, let's see how this sounds. To remove an FX channel, simply click on its ellipsis menu and select Remove FX Channel. Even though the FX channel is now gone, you can still clean up any channels that were sending signal to it by right-clicking on the Send slot and selecting Remove Send. You can remove FX inserts in the same way, or by clicking on the respective ellipsis menus in the effects rack and selecting Remove Insert. You can use the various ellipsis menus in this page to store entire mixes, channel and subchannel effects strips, and individual effects settings. Finally, let's talk about the two UI expansions that can be accessed by clicking these tabs, the Instrument Rack and the Inspector tab. The Instrument Rack, which has been open for most of this video, is basically an overview of all the instruments within the instance of Opus you currently have open. It contains some of the most commonly used controls like volume and pan controls, mute and solo buttons, and the purge and load functions. It also allows you to both see and specify an instrument's MIDI modes and channels, as well as the MIDI output channels from Opus to your DAW. The Instrument Rack contains two significant ellipsis menus as well. The one found at the top right corner of each instrument allows you the option to remove the instrument or to reveal it in the Browse page. The ellipsis menu in the top toolbar of the Instrument Rack allows you to purge all instruments in that particular instance of Opus from RAM, or to purge every instrument in every instance of Opus currently loaded in your digital audio workstation. In this menu, you can also update the selected instrument or update all instruments, which will reload the instrument from the library in case it was updated by an instrument update. The inspector pane is essentially a nuts and bolts overview that displays a variety of informational content depending on what you have selected, as well as which page you happen to be in. Well, if you made it this far, congratulations. You now have everything you need to know to start using the Opus player with confidence. The possibilities are endless, and we here at EastWest look forward to seeing what you create with all the powerful tools made available to you in this product.